Remember those little paintings I did recently? I had to make some more because most of them already sold out. You might remember that I painted a series of quite small paintings on wood panel. They're like 20 by 20, and I really love that little format. It's just like once it's framed, it's a little object. And I made 10 of them. If you haven't seen that, I'll leave a link to the playlist down below. And I was going to put them on my website, and then I was going to show them at the other art fair. But the day I had finished framing them, or a couple of days after, my art consultant asked to come to my studio and talk about some paintings that he wants for a project. And I shared that in a previous video, that most of my last collection sold. But also, the little paintings that I'd just finished, nobody had seen them before. He came into my studio and saw them and said, "These are perfect. I want basically all of them." So I think 8 out of the 10 paintings he now used for that project. So I thought, they're a really good little size to show at an art fair. Because they're a bit more of a lower price point, even though they're still an original artwork and quite expensive. But it's just nice to have some smaller pieces. I thought, well, that was actually really fun working on them in that way, where I start with them all pushed together as one piece and then separate them and work on them a little bit more individually, a little bit with a little bit more intention. So I just did it again. I did 8 more, and I'm going to show you the whole process from start to finish, so you don't have to watch several videos to see how they turn out. I've pushed a load of 20 by 20 centimeter wood panels together, so they're acting as one piece. I've gessoed them first, and I'm just going crazy with marks with soft pastels. And then I'm adding some fluid acrylic medium on top and kind of smudging all the pigment. And that fixes them in place and also creates this really beautiful soft effect that is quite unpredictable. And then I am adding some more different media, like some acrylic markers and the Stabilo Woodies, which are also water soluble. And then I'm going over the Stabilo Woodies with the acrylic medium again, and basically do the same that I did with the soft pastels and smudge them, and that also fixes them in place. So when I go over it with a wet medium again, like acrylic paint, it won't budge. And the purpose of getting all these insanely crazy marks and a lot of unpredictable textures into the painting is that it already gives me a lot of interest right in the first layers that I can then build on and calm down a little bit and take bits away. So now I'm adding some acrylic paint. I've actually pre-mixed this color and a few others that I'm going to use. I do have a video where I show how I make my color palettes and then batch mix some of those colors, just so I have them handy. And that was really helpful here in the process because I didn't have a lot of time. And I didn't have to spend a lot of time mixing paints, even though you will see me mix a little bit more precise colors later on.
This video is kindly sponsored by Skillshare. I bet you love learning new skills as much as I am. As a creative, you can never know enough, no matter whether you want to improve your painting skills, learn how to build your art business, how to show up online, or how to promote your work. Skillshare is the place I go to when I want to dip my toes into a new topic. Even though I'm an abstract artist at my core, I love experimenting with other styles every now and then too. I love the joyful nature of Jessie Relay's class Joyful Abstracts with acrylic painting. Even though I also paint joyful abstracts, her style is quite different to mine, and it was fun to follow someone else's lead and venture out from what I usually do. The class is very detailed and talks about all stages of the process, from gathering inspiration to mixing colours and even varnishing your piece at the end. Skillshare has creative classes taught by amazing, world-class creatives like professional illustrators, renowned graphic designers, and successful entrepreneurs. The platform is designed to help you build creativity into your life by learning directly from real, super talented and successful creatives. If there is something you've been meaning to learn, I bet Skillshare has a class on that. The first 500 people to use my link in the description or scan the QR code will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare plus 20% off their first payment. Get started today.
I've also really been enjoying using acrylic inks just because they're so liquid. They really pack a punch. They're very intensely pigmented. And also they are really beautiful when you want to add some more transparent layers. And I really love working with transparent layers. So after I've worked on all the pieces together, I then separate them out and work on them more individually, because that's when I then can really see all the individual compositions of each piece. When I work on them together, the purpose is really to just get textures on and not think of them as individual pieces. Only once I separate them, I then will look at them individually. So I've added some more acrylic ink here, and I think my brush was a little bit wet, which is why it didn't stick very well to the canvas. But once it was dry, it was fine. And then obviously I put a layer of gloss medium over the top once the painting is finished before the varnish, and that will fix everything in place anyway. So I wasn't too worried at that stage. And here I am actually experimenting with purple. I used to really hate purple, but somehow it's just slowly making its way into my paintings. It started with that mauvey color that you saw me use here as well. This pre-mixed kind of very dusty, dirty pinky color. So I really just wanted to see if I can make purple work, and I actually ended up really loving that piece. So I'm adding some more liquid ink here, and you see how that creates a really beautiful transparent color that I couldn't have done this easily with acrylic paint. You can obviously achieve it with acrylic paint as well, but it's just so much easier to do it with ink. This is that purpley color that I was talking about, and I really love the contrast of this purple, or this I don't know what to call it, mauve, dusty color with the yellow as a contrast, because they're complementary colors and I really love those together. This one didn't have much of a solid surface on here yet. It was all kind of just those lines and marks. So I wanted to bring a little bit more calm by adding more of a solid layer, solid areas with that acrylic paint. This one I already love, actually. I really like how the colors are working together here. You've got some more saturated colors and that balance with some more muted colors. So I'm just adding a little bit more muted colors here, so the vibrancy of the more saturated colors can really shine. I also love all the marks on there. This one as well. This one is maybe a bit too linear. All the lines are kind of going across the painting. So I'm just trying to break that up a little bit. And again, I've used some acrylic ink, and that makes a really lovely transparent color. I think I had some acrylic medium mixed in there as well, which is why it was very transparent. This one, I'm actually covering a lot of that. Again, it was bothering me a little bit that the lines are going straight across. So I just broke that up with a little bit more of a solid color. This one I'm not quite sure what to do with, so I'm just adding some more yellow, because lately I've been wanting to put yellow in everything, and yellow makes just everything so much happier, and I really love that. So I'm adding a few more of the yellow oxide with the red mixed together. So that's more of a muted yellowy orange. And I'm putting that in lots of different places on this painting, just dot it around so the eye can move around the painting with the help of that color.
If you like this video, consider subscribing.
And I'm adding some more of that mauvey color because I really love that together with the yellow. It's almost like it's vibrating on the panel. This one at this stage I'm really hating, and I don't quite know what to do with it. So I think I'm going to lean into that red later on. We'll see. But for now, I'm just adding this mauvey color just to calm it down a little bit and add some more muted color. I always like to keep a balance between muted colors and more saturated colors because they play off each other really nicely. And rigid colors make saturated colors look even more saturated when they're next to each other. And the same goes for muted colors looking a bit more muted when they're next to very bright saturated colors. When I'm adding a glaze, sometimes I add too much paint, and that's fine. That's totally part of the process. And then you can wipe away a little bit more and it gets more transparent. Here's a purple one again. And I just want to add a little bit more muted color. So I'm adding this pinky neutral light color. And I also don't want these to get too dark. So I'm trying to add some more light in if I've already covered a lot of the lightness with a darker color. Here I want to add another glaze, so a transparent layer of color of the red, but I'm actually not using the ink or paint. I'm using a Neocolor 2 crayon, which is water soluble. I'm just going over it very lightly and then adding some of the matte acrylic medium again. And that dissolves the pigment in the crayons and then creates this lovely haze. But you can still see some of the texture of the crayon, which I really like. This blue one doesn't really do anything for me yet, so I think I'm going to actually lean into the blue here. So I've added a little bit of transparent medium so I can make a bit more of a transparent layer, and I'm dotting some of the ultramarine blue, which creates a bit of texture, and then I'm just making some random brush strokes here, and I'm just experimenting at this stage because I'm not quite sure where this piece is going, so I want to keep it loose and experiment with marks and see what happens if I don't think too much, and then I will be more thinky and analytical about composition and color and so on later on. This is the one that I love again, and there was a bit too much texture, a bit too much line work here, so I'm just adding some more paint to create a bit of a more solid area. And because I painted the yellow into the wet mauvey color, it kind of merges a little bit and blends really nicely. This bit on the side was a bit too white, so I've just added a little bit more of a glaze. This one, again, I'm not quite sure where this one's going. I added a bit of a red glaze earlier, but it didn't really show. So now I'm just fully leaning into the red. But I am still keeping it quite transparent so you can see the lovely texture and the marks underneath. But I also think it's a bit too transparent, all the layers on it. There isn't really any more opaque area, so I'm just mixing together like a darkish brown neutral to add a bit more of a calm area. Actually really reminds me of autumn trees, probably because I see them everywhere right now, and autumn colors. But that wasn't the original intention. But it just so happens that it reminds me of that. I actually find it really interesting to hear what other people see in my work. Sometimes they see a dog or a face or a certain feeling that I hadn't originally thought of when I made it. But it's really interesting to see what everybody sees in my paintings with the history of their lives and the experience they've had that influence what they see in paintings. I've just added those little blue dots because I think that's a really nice complementary color contrast and really makes that painting zing. I really like that in the end. Here again, I feel like it needs a little bit more color, but I do want to keep it quite neutral. So I've added a bit more of that yellow, in a more muted way. And I'm just adding a little bit of blue to the bottom. Again, that's nice color contrast, complementary color to the yellow on the other side, but it's very subtle. The most interesting thing about this piece is actually the red, so I do want to add a little bit more red and just make it a bit darker, a bit more opaque. And it still needs something a little bit more interesting, so I'm adding this little scribble with a Neocolor 2 crayon, which I will actually fix later so it doesn't smudge. Here again, I think the red is quite interesting, but I just want to make it a little bit more dominant, a little bit more visible. And this one I think also could benefit with a little scribble with a Neocolor 2 crayon. I actually really like that little dotty texture. It brings something quite different to the other marks in this painting. But it does need a little bit more contrast, I think. That's why I've added a little bit more of the dark blue in that top corner, just to balance out that swoosh at the bottom, or kind of middle. And then I'm also adding this slightly more neutral dark color, again, to balance that composition and move your eye around the painting. I think it's one of my new favorite ways of working on smaller paintings, to start with them as one and then separate them out. You really get some unpredictable compositions, really. Whatever hasn't sold yet, you'll be able to see on my website. Well, you'll see all of them on my website. I'll leave a link below to the series in the description box. If you want to see the other paintings that I made recently, more of a larger format, then I'll leave the playlist link in the description box as well. Thanks, and bye-bye.